So we are looking at the back of our combining like terms notes. This is something that you had started and you watched a video last week where we defined on the front the vocabulary terms and we looked at the chart on the bottom of the front where we identified like terms. And so just to refresh our memory, we are looking at these expressions, which is just a string of positive and negative terms. And our job is just to make them as simple as possible by combining any terms that have the same variable and those variables being raised to the same power. So you should have in front of you at least 3 different colors, whether they're colored pencils or highlighters, because we're going to use those today to help us identify our like terms. So just looking at this first example at the top, yours is not color-coded and mine is. And I just want to explain to you before we start how these colors came to be. So we see up here at the top that we have a 5x plus 4 minus 2x plus 2 minus 3y. And so really we have 5 different terms. This 5x is a term, that plus 4 is a constant as we defined on the front of our page. This minus 2x is a term, plus 2 is a term, and minus 3y. And so really what we're trying to do is take these 5 terms and simplify it. Get it as simple as possible, combine as many of them as possible, just to make it nicer to look at, to be honest. So you see down here that they used the color yellow to color in this 5x term right here. And then they looked across the line and saw that this other term that they also colored in yellow has an x as their variable. So they colored in yellow both of these like terms with an x variable. And it's really important to notice that they included this little negative or minus sign with that 2x, because as we read over here, the operation symbols stay with the number behind them. I want you to underline or highlight that, maybe put a star over here, because really this is a string of positive and negative terms. This is a negative 2x. And so when we combine terms, combining just means that we're adding them together. We're combining a positive and a negative number. So we're adding a 5 to a negative 2. So those are both highlighted in yellow, but again, there's no other x terms present. So the yellow color stops. But then we see a green color here circling the constant, or just that plus 4. And again, that plus sign goes with the 4. It's a positive 4. And then there's another green highlighting that positive 2 or plus 2. These are both constants, and therefore we can combine them. We know how to add 4 and 2, and we've known how to do that for a while now. So again, this whole process is just combining and simplifying what we can. And then over here at the end, you see in red all by itself is this minus 3y. Again, that minus sign is included. It's a negative 3 there because there's no other y term. So that is the only red colored term because there's no other y variable terms. So then we see this final line right here is the simplified version, because they took here in the yellow color, they had 5x and they added it to a negative 2, and 5 plus negative 2 gives me a 3, and then of course that x stays with it. It would be just like we were combining 5 apples and we lost 2 apples, so now we have 3 apples. That's just a real life explanation behind this. Then we also see in green, and I know that they changed the colors down there at the bottom, they had a 4 plus a 2 here in green, and 4 plus 2 we know gets us a plus 6, which is why in our final simplified expression there's a plus sign before the 6. That's a positive 6 that these two terms combine to be. And then lastly, that negative or minus 3y just gets thrown in here because there was nothing else to combine it with. But this is our final simplified version of this expression, and you can use colors to denote that. That's how we're going to do the examples below on this page as well. But this would be our final answer. Just a good habit to get in is just to double check that there's nothing else we can combine. I see a term with an x, a term with a y, and then a constant, and none of those we can combine anymore because they don't have the same variable. So you should have some colors in front of you. We're going to try a couple of these together now. Just guided examples before you try some on your own. So these 2 examples down here at the bottom, I'm going to use some highlighters and want you to be doing the same on your page in front of you. And I'm just going to start with the first term I see. I'm going to color it in that first color that I have. I have an 8M. And so I just picked a color. I picked yellow. You can pick whatever you want. And I'm going to scan across the line. I see a 13G next, which doesn't have an M, so that's not something we can combine. We have a -8. That's a constant I can't combine. But then I have a +3M. And again, notice in my highlighting, I'm being very careful and including that plus sign with the 3. Please be sure that you are including those signs, otherwise something's going to get lost. That plus sign goes with the 3. But then we have a -G, so we're done with our yellow color. So I'm going to pick up a different color. I just happened to pick green, and I'm going to highlight that next term. I see a +13G. I highlight that in green. I included the sign before it. I look next. I see a -8, which doesn't have a G attached, but this last term does have a G. And you might be wondering, well, how many G is that? It's just a G. And really, if there's no coefficient or a number in front of it, I always recommend just putting one in there. This is 1G, just to help you think about the math that we're going to go through, 1G. And then lastly, in a different color, I'm going to use blue now. We have this constant, and it's the only constant there, so it's in its own color, a -8. And so, again, we have 5 terms here, and our goal is to simplify it. So I'm going to start with the yellow. I have 8M here, and I'm adding to it, I'm combining it, a +3. So 8 plus 3, or 8 plus +3, gives me 11M. So I'm going to write that down below. I'm combining those yellow terms. Then I see there in green, I have a +13G, and I'm combining, so I'm adding a -1G. So I have 13 plus a -1. And when I combine those, 13 plus -1 is the same just as 13 minus 1. I get 12G. And that's a positive 12G, which is why a plus sign is put in here. Plus 12G. And then that -8, again, had nothing to combine with, but it still is part of the expression, so it needs to be included in our final answer. Again, I'm just going to double check. I have an M term, I have a G term, and I have a constant, and none of those can be combined anymore, which is why this is my final answer. So let's try one more together. Again, I'm still using my colors. I'm being very particular on how I'm highlighting them. I'm going to start and just color in that first term in the first color I have, which is 4B. And as I look across, I see here another B term. It's just a +B. Again, that plus sign needs to be highlighted. Be very particular and neat with that highlighting so you know it's attached. And then I'm just going to do as I suggested, put a little 1 in front of that B because it is 1B. And I don't want you to be confused. How many B is that? Do we combine it? Yes, there is a B, so put a 1 there. This term has an A and a B, and because of that, it is not a like term with these two terms. So I do not highlight that in yellow because this also has an A, therefore it's a different variable. So I'm going to pick up a different color. I'm going to highlight my +3, which is my constant. And as I look across, I also see a -1. So I'm going to combine 3 plus -1 in that term. And then lastly, in my final color, I'm just going to highlight this term. There's no other term that has an AB attached, so that's by itself. So as I go to combine, I'm looking here at my yellow terms. I have 4B plus a +1B. So we know 4 plus 1 gives me 5B. Then in green here, I have a 3 plus, because I'm combining, a -1. So I have 3 plus -1, which is the same as 3 minus 1, which is just 2. So again, because it's 2, it's not -2, I'm just going to say +2 in my expression down below. And then lastly, my final term that has no other like terms just stays put as 4AB. So again, we just took 5 terms, combined them, and simplified it down to 3 terms down here at the bottom. And there's nothing else down there that I combined, so this would be my final answer. So as you see down on this page, there are 4 more example problems, and these 4 problems are going to be what I'm going to ask you to do now. And if you don't get them done here in class, it's what you'll take home to do for homework, and we'll start here again tomorrow. But please, please, please continue to use those colors as we practiced. Make sure that you are highlighting the sign in front of the numbers, such as this, and being very neat about it. so you know when you're adding these terms together, is it a positive term or a negative term? And that hopefully we can work down and combine all of these to get less terms than we start with. So at this point, video is done. You may work on these 4 problems. If you finish before class ends, come check in with me. Otherwise, I'll check in with you tomorrow.